Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Nuances with Nura. I said I was going to wait a while before speaking about grief, but unfortunately, grief doesn't always wait until we're ready to talk about it. And honestly, this is only one part of a much larger conversation. There are so many layers to grief, so many ways it can affect us, and so many directions this conversation could go. But for today, this is the part I felt called to speak about. So before we begin today's episode, I want to offer a trigger warning. This episode discusses grief, addiction, substance use, and overdose. Please protect yourself and listen only if you feel able to. Grief has been especially present in my life lately. I've lost a few friends the past few years, and those losses have brought so much back to the surface. Not only the pain of losing them, but memories of others I've lost throughout my life. Out of respect for everyone affected, this episode isn't about any one person, nor will I be sharing anyone's story or the circumstances surrounding their passing. Those stories do not belong to me alone, and they aren't mine to tell. Instead, I want to speak more broadly about overdose, substance use, and the grief that can follow, the difficult questions these losses leave behind, and what they can bring up for those of us left trying to make sense of them. This is a kind of loss I've encountered several times throughout my life. And I'll be honest, before I began doing the work to heal, grief used to cripple me. I was angry, sad, and I felt like nobody understood what I was going through. I would even push people away when they were just trying to support me. But now I'm learning how to hold the sadness, the shock, the disappointment, and the confusion differently, even when I know some of my questions may never be answered. Again, this episode isn't about one person. It isn't an attempt to diagnose anyone, expose anyone's private struggles, or reduce an entire life to the way it ended. It's about a much larger pattern. It's about what happens when we lose somebody in circumstances involving substances, the assumptions we make afterward, and the difficult questions their absence forces us to confront about addiction, coping, and the ways we continue living. There is so much more I could say about these friendships and what their losses have meant to me, and I may explore some of those stories in future episodes. But for now, I want to talk about one particular question that has come to mind while I was discussing loss with a friend. It was a question I asked myself after something was said to me, one I had never really considered in quite this way before. And honestly, it might trigger some listeners. But if it does bring something up for you, I ask that you don't immediately push it away. If you feel safe enough to do so, sit with the discomfort and allow yourself to acknowledge whatever is underneath it, whether it be the pain, the shame, the guilt, or anything else that surfaces. Because sometimes feeling what we've spent so long avoiding is how we begin to heal it, so it no longer consumes us or continues shaping our lives, especially when the result is or could one day become grief. This question isn't intended to hurt or judge anyone. My hope is that it might wake something up within us, that it might become a moment when we see things differently. Maybe we find some clarity and perhaps begin making different choices for ourselves moving forward. When a death involves substances, people often focus on the substance, but I don't think substance use is ever only just about the substance. Maybe someone started young and enjoyed partying but never learned how to leave that part of their life behind. Maybe they tried something once, continued doing it because everyone around them was doing it, and eventually it became something we've normalized. Maybe it gave them confidence, connection, or belonging. Or maybe it was an escape from something they didn't know how to deal with, because there is almost always a bigger picture. And I think when losses happen like this, our first reaction is often, what the fuck happened? The hardest part is that sometimes we simply don't know. When somebody dies from an overdose, it's easy to immediately assume, I didn't know their addiction was that bad. But I think the better question is, do we truly know there was an addiction? Maybe there was. Maybe that person had been struggling deeply and privately with something none of us could see. Maybe substances had become a way of surviving emotions they didn't know how to hold. But maybe it wasn't an ongoing addiction. Maybe it was occasional. Maybe it was a single decision on a single night. Maybe their body simply couldn't withstand it that time, and from there, it just shut down. Maybe they didn't know exactly what they were taking. Who honestly truly knows? Because you don't always know whether someone was struggling with addiction, using occasionally, or experienced one horrible incident that changed everything. The way someone died may tell us what happened to their body in one moment, but it doesn't necessarily tell us the complete story of their life. And I think we need to be careful about writing that story for someone after they're gone. especially when they aren't here to explain it, correct us, or defend themselves. Because let me ask you, if any one of us died after using a substance, would we want that final moment to become the explanation for our entire life? Would we want people assuming there had been a hidden addiction when really there hadn't been? Or would we want people to admit that they simply don't know? Because maybe it was an addiction. Maybe it was an escape. Maybe it was one devastating, irreversible moment. The uncomfortable truth is that more than one possibility can exist, and those of us left behind may never receive an answer that makes the loss make sense. So, what are the facts? What we do know is that a life has been lost. We know that person was loved, and we know that reducing an entire human being to the circumstances of their death could never capture everything they were. When someone passes this way, grief can hold so many emotions at once. Sadness for the person we lost, heartbreak for the people left behind, anger, disappointment, confusion, even frustration, especially when that person had already witnessed where this road could lead with ones they lost prior to their passing. We can love someone deeply and still feel angry about the way we lost them. We can have compassion for what someone may have been going through while also acknowledging the pain surrounding the loss. Those truths can exist together. While speaking with someone about loss, I heard the words, "I thought we were done with this. I thought we were done losing people this way." And immediately, it sparked a question that entered my mind. But have we stopped? Have we stopped partying in the same ways? Have we stopped using substances to avoid what we truly feel? Have we changed the environments we put ourselves in, the behaviors we normalize, or the ways we cope when life becomes painful? This question isn't directed at one person. It isn't about blame, and it isn't a claim that everyone who drinks or parties has an addiction. It's a question for all of us. Have these losses changed anything about the way we live? Because when we're grieving, we reach for whatever helps us survive that moment. For some people, that's community, therapy, movement, or rest. For others, it may be drinking or drugs, the very same coping mechanisms connected to the loss they're trying to process. Not because they don't care, and not because they haven't been affected, but because witnessing the consequences of a coping mechanism doesn't automatically teach us how to replace it. Knowing something is hurting us and knowing how to stop are two completely different things. Let me say that again. Knowing something is hurting us and knowing how to stop are two completely different things. And maybe that's where we need to become more honest. When somebody dies, we reach out to the people who love them. We offer our condolences and say, "If there is anything you need, I'm here." But how often do we really mean it? And even when we do mean it, how often does the grieving person feel safe enough to take us up on it? I personally struggle to reach out when I'm hurting. Even though I genuinely mean it whenever I offer that same support to someone else, I worry that I'm putting something on somebody else. I know how easy "I'm here if you need me" can sound like something people are simply supposed to say. It feels like a programmed response, does it not? But realistically, support needs to become more active. We need to make it a thing. Instead of saying, "Let me know if you need anything," maybe we ask, "Can I sit with you today?" Maybe we check in again after the funeral, after the messages slow down, and after everyone else appears to have returned to their lives. Maybe we create spaces where people don't have to numb themselves because they're afraid their pain will be too much for somebody else. Because here's the thing, the people who truly care about us can absolutely hold space for us. They can hold our hands when life becomes heavy. They can remind us that asking for help isn't the same as becoming a burden. But we also have to let ourselves be reached. Grief does not automatically create change. Sometimes it creates promises made in the most emotional moments. Promises that slowly disappear when ordinary life returns. And honestly, it reminds me in some ways of the early days of COVID. For a moment, many of us slowed down, checked in on one another, and reconsidered what truly mattered. But as the world reopened, it became easy to return to autopilot and our familiar routines, as though that period had simply been another obstacle to survive rather than an experience that could permanently change us. Real change asks more of us. It asks us to look at what we've normalized. It asks us to question whether our version of fun is still fun. It asks us to notice when something we once chose has started choosing for us. And it asks us to find new ways to cope before the only coping mechanism we know becomes the very thing that takes us away from the people who love us. So when we say, I thought we were done losing people this way, I wonder if the million-dollar question is, what have we changed so that we stop losing people this way? Have we changed the way we cope? Have we changed the way we support one another? Have we made it safer to ask for help? Have we stopped glorifying behaviors that we later mourn when they have devastating consequences? And have we allowed these losses to teach us something, not through blame or shame, but through honesty? Because nothing changes simply because we were devastated by what happened. Nothing changes unless something changes within us. Maybe honoring the people we've lost isn't only about grieving how they died. Maybe it's also about becoming more curious about what they may have been carrying, becoming more present with the people who are still here, and becoming more honest about the ways we escape ourselves. So I'll leave you guys with this. Has loss ever made you question the way you cope? And if it has, when life started moving again, did that question fade? Or did you allow it to change you? I'll leave it there today, guys. If you connected with this episode, please don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe. Every time you hit that follow button, you help this show grow and allow it to reach the people who may need these conversations most. Thank you so much for supporting me on this journey as we continue shifting our perspectives and raising our frequency together. I know this conversation won't apply to everyone, and that every person's grief, trauma, and experiences are unique. These are simply the thoughts that come to me and what I felt called to share today. You guys aren't expected to agree with everything that I say. So, as always, take what resonates and leave what doesn't, and I'll see you next week.